Douglas Holtz-Eakin, as we like to call him today, the former Congressional Budget Office Director, what he makes of everything going on. The Irish ones are the only ones who aren't smiling. A lot of investors getting pounded this week on the notion, with all of the pots of gold for the banks, they're going through it pretty fast, and it's not helping them. What do you make of that?
Well, it's pretty interesting. When we saw Silicon Valley Bank, get into trouble, it didn't seem to me that it merited the response we saw. This 100% guarantee of the uninsured deposits, setting up a new lending facility where you can get par value for bonds that have sunk below that in market value. It seemed out of proportion to the problem, and I think that scares people. I thought it was a mistake to have the president talking about it. That doesn't comfort people. It makes people think, no, this is a big deal, and so. We've now seen First Republic and, a horse of a different color, Credit Suisse, which has had problems for a long, long time. And I think we've just got a lot of uncertainty facing the financial sector, and the average investor doesn't know how to sort it out, and we're seeing that in the markets.
You know, Doug, Kevin O'Leary has been on this network, and he's talked a lot about why we have so many regional banks in the first place, thousands of them all over the place, and that there's a downsizing that's due.
Because we never let one fail, Neil.
Well, that's just
we never let one fail.
And yet, back in the 1980s, we let hundreds of S&Ls fail and go by the wayside. That would be very, very tough love, and they're not all due for that. But that he was almost saying we've outgrown the need for this. What do you think?
I've often thought that people really don't think clearly about banks, the financial sector. In almost every industry, there are firms of different sizes and different scopes. So we need banks that have a multinational scope, that have the scale to close big deals for our largest corporations. And we need some smaller banks as well. But we don't have to have this notion that every bank that fails constitutes a national failure. Firms go out of business in every industry all the time. And the hallmark of successful competition is, in fact, having some firms fail. And it seems to me we've gotten away from that in banking and financial services, and that's a problem. And that our regulators have to start genuinely trying to let markets work better in these areas, because ultimately it'll serve the taxpayer better, it'll serve the customers better. You really shouldn't have a bank that's not doing due diligence and have your money in there. And that's so we need to get away from the model we're in right now.
What if other banks get caught up in the fray, having nothing to do with their business practices or how they run their banks or whether they're upside down on Treasury bill and note investments? What if they're just part of that contagion of a sell-off for people who are moving from smaller regional banks to big banks? We're told, upwards of $20 billion this week alone to banks like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, maybe much more than that. And they're suffering because of that through nothing that they've done. What do you do for them? Anything?
Right. So there's a very fine line in banking between illiquid and insolvent, because fire sale of assets can lower the values on your balance sheet and turn you into an insolvent institution very, very quickly. So to prevent that and to have only the truly insolvent get closed, we've always had as a piece of central banking being the lender of last resort for liquidity purposes, not capital infusions, but making the cash flows balance out. It seems to me that's a role that the Fed has been pulled back too far from, that we need a lender of last resort for liquidity purposes. Silicon Valley Bank, that wasn't their problem. Their problem was they're genuinely insolvent. They had a terrible balance sheet, and some very smart venture capitalists took one look at it and thought, nope, this isn't going to make it. Let's get our money out. And the run started because they were insolvent. It's a very different situation than a regional bank that's done nothing wrong and suddenly finds deposits rolling out. That's where the lender of last resort has to step in.
Yeah, that's the position we're in right now. Doug, thank you very much. Have a great St. Paddy's Day.